His candidacy in the DRC's upcoming presidential elections.
Well, yesterday, the Election Commission ruled out Bemba running on the basis that the International Criminal Court had convicted him in March 2018 for bribing witnesses. He was handed a one-year prison term and fined 300,000 euros.
But the court overturned Bemba's conviction for war crimes and he returned to the capital Kinshasa earlier this month after being acquitted.
Democratic Republic of Congo opposition leader Jean-Pierre Bemba has been excluded from running in the country's upcoming election. The former warlord was barred from December's vote after a decade in prison in The Hague for war crimes. Bemba is popular in Western Congo, including the capital Kinshasa, and his exclusion could trigger a violent reaction by his supporters. Street battles between militiamen loyal to Bemba and state forces broke out after he lost the 2006 election to current President Joseph Kabila. The International Criminal Court has overturned Bemba's convictions for crimes against humanity, for murder, rape and pillage. But his witness tampering conviction still stands. The DRC's election committee cited that sticking point as the reason for his exclusion. He was among 6 candidates deemed ineligible. Their decision can be appealed before the final list is published in September. Opposition parties have criticised the committee for its, quote, determination to suppress the electoral process. Last month, Bemba placed 3rd in a rare public opinion poll on the likely outcome of the election, winning 17% support. Kabila, meanwhile, has obeyed the country's 2-term limit and not put his name forward for December's election. But as a parting shot, he picked a former Interior Minister who's been placed under EU sanctions to stand instead. That ensures the leader, who's been in power since 2001, will remain closely involved in national politics for the foreseeable future. And he'll be eligible to run again next time round.
Well, to unpack this, we are joined in studio by African Affairs analyst Nixon Katembo. A very good evening to you, Nixon. It's always a pleasure having you in studio. Thank you so much and a warm welcome to the Globe.
Thanks you once more for welcoming me in the studio.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure. Now, in every peace-seeking solution, a compromise always takes the lead. I mean, is this a scenario where the Electoral Commission is needed to make such an exception to this rule?
I don't think that it needed to make an exception, but you have to look at the political process that have unfolded leading up to the exclusion of Bemba in these elections. This is purely a legal issue which emanates from the constitution of the DRC, which stipulates that someone who have been sentenced, or at least for 1 year, is excluded from any elective process in the country. But not only that, who have also resided outside of the country for over the year period. So within that framework, I think that the CENI has excluded Bemba, but one cannot rule out also the political maneuvering owing to sort of the constitutional challenges and the problems that have been happening. But we have to categorically state that this is a sort of a constitutional crisis that has happened in the DRC for over a long time, where President Kabila has used that loophole in the constitution to stay in power, because the constitution clearly says that, you know, he has a new president have to come into power after another one have, the incumbent has to leave power after a new president have been elected. And in this way, it does not clearly state when and how that president must come in.
Political maneuvering might have been at play here, as you've just rightly mentioned. I want to talk to you about the constitutionality of the electoral body's decision to exclude Pierre Bemba from running in the presidential race. Was the Electoral Commission within its rights constitutionally to exclude him, or was it maybe violating some of his rights?
One of the challenges in the DRC is that you cannot clearly state that the electoral body was within its right. But however, want to follow what the Constitution says. The Constitution clearly indicates that they may be within their right to exclude Bemba, but that Constitution cannot be applied selectively on part of Bemba, whereas other, political players also have been excluded in a manner that are not consistent with the agreements that they have signed in the December at the St. Sylvester, which was organized by the Catholic Church, which stipulated that all political prisoners who should be released, to people who have been in exile should be returned to contest in a more inclusive elections. And I think that political compromise leading up to these elections have been thrown out of the window by the Electoral Commission and the government of the DRC, therefore maneuvering the opposition at this political process.
Now that Bemba's party wants to appeal the decision by the Electoral Commission, without preempting any political interference, of course, what's the likelihood of the Electoral Commission reversing such a decision?
I don't see any likelihood of the Electoral Commission revising this because you have to understand that those who are at the Constitutional Court were recently appointed by President Joseph Kabila himself. And most of them, by the way, are said to be close allies to the president. So they will likely to listen to the mandate from the president owing to the political influence that he has over the Supreme Court or the Constitutional Court in the country, but also not only that, the Electoral Commission as well. Corneille Enanga being one who has been fingered as being part of the government's machinery to try to maneuver these elections.
No, the past elections were perhaps the deadliest, particularly the 2006 and the 2011 election. It was perhaps the deadliest. So many lives were lost. So are we bracing ourselves for yet another bloody election come December this year? It's
not only just elections. The DRC is beyond elections. There are more other things that are not being looked at. For instance, the regional influence, the different political interests that are within the DRC, but a region also interests. So we're likely to see more violence, and many commentators and analysts have said that the DRC is likely to implode. If you look at Bemba himself coming to the political scene as a rebel leader, he was supported by Uganda. And he still have much links of that, with his former allies. You look at the likes of Joseph Kabila himself, he still have control over the army. You look at Emmanuel Shadari also, who has been sanctioned by the European Union. So to gain legitimacy through the electoral process is a do or die for some of these people. And you must take into account that just recently the president has just chosen some of the leaders within the army to head the army, the likes of John Numbi and all others who have been sanctioned by the European Union and the United States for their part in abetting human rights violations in the country. But that tells you that there are more sinister plans actually to plunge the country into disarray.
You know, hundreds, if not thousands, of foreign troops, particularly the Rwandan troops, are fighting their own battles in the DRC. So should violence flare up, and God forbid, would they be affected in a way, and how much of an impact would it have on their own battles at home in their countries of origin?
Well, one thing would have to make clear that Rwanda's presence in the DRC has been since 1996, when they came under the AFDEL umbrella. Laurent Kabila was initially not part to the formation of AFDEL. He was taken in as a face of the war to make it as a Congolese are fighting this war against Mobutu. But the real machinery behind the war of AFDEL and Mobutu's, ousting was led by Rwanda. And there is no doubt about that. But its presence has continued then. There has been attempt to, not only attempt, but there have been planned to recycle rebellions after rebellions from RCD to RCD Goma to CNDP of Laurent Nkunda to the M23, and now to the sort of process of saying that we're having a joint verification and the joint pursuing of FDLR on the Congolese soil. But the FDLR could be less than 1,000 to 2,000, I mean less than 2,000 to 1,000 militiamen. One wonder why have the Rwandan and the Congolese failed to track these few troublemakers. They are more planned that, as we have been discussing earlier in this program, that, you know, the Eastern DRC is effectively controlled economically by Rwanda and Uganda. And that's where you see that at some point Rwanda was a net exporter of coltan. But if you ask whether there are coltan mine in Rwanda, I don't know of any. For someone who comes from the region will, I think, attest to that. So that in itself is a recipe for disaster going towards these elections, because all those forces that have been supported by Rwanda and those who have been supported by Uganda are going to use this as a pretext actually to cause chaos. Already the M23 rebel has issued a declaration that they are monitoring the situation in the country and they will not hesitate to take up arms against Kabila's government. Now, if the exclusion of Bemba, and not only Bemba and all other political players in these elections are not, you know, playing out in the sense that there is a compromise and they're making sure that peace prevails, okay, the likelihood of war is imminent.
Okay, we don't have much time, unfortunately, so please be as brief as you possibly can. Now, SADC has been blamed, in particular, for not doing enough to solve the crises in the DRC. We've seen President Cyril Ramaphosa having negotiations with his counterpart, Joseph Kabila. What do you think he should have said? I know that maybe Ramaphosa does not want to interfere. He does not want to adopt that interventionist approach, as we've seen other South African leaders in the past, distancing themselves from the internal affairs of other countries. What do you think he should have said, or what do you think he should have done in his capacity as the SADC chair?
As a SADC chair, I think President Ian Khama, while he's still Botswana's president, he provided a clear stance on what should be done. And I think SADC leadership should have followed Ian Khama's advice, as well as Joao Lorenzo of Angola saying that Kabila should respect the constitution and allow an inclusive political process, not just to choose some political leaders to exclude the other, and therefore creating a chaos within the support base of these political opposition leaders, therefore plunging the country into total chaos.
Yeah. And it's interesting because Joseph Kabila himself has rejected any foreign bodies. He's rejected any foreign observers. He even rejected the SADC envoy to the DRC, Mr. Thabo Mbeki, saying that they want to maintain and uphold their own sovereignty. So it's a matter that we still have to watch out for. But then thank you so much for your analysis, Nixon. Thank you. We appreciate your time. That is a journalist and African affairs analyst, Nixon Katembo, joining us live right here on The Globe. This is The Globe on SABC News. Let's take a short break. We'll be back with more shortly thereafter.